Welcome. This is just a summary for Year 11 students and their parents to bring them up to date with the results from the Ofqual consultation early in January. Yesterday, the Department for Education and Ofqual published all their findings and what different groups of people had said. What we do know is 100,000 people took part in the consultation and over half of those were students. So if that's you that took part, you've had a say in the process, and that's just brilliant. We're really pleased with what's come out from a school point of view. It looks really positive, and the most important thing is it looks like students are going to get the grades that they deserve. So I wanted to summarise the information. That is all available on the Ofquals website, but obviously not everybody wants to read through everything. So the first thing is they're going to use assessment evidence based upon teachers using a whole range of evidence to make a judgment of the grade that students are performing at now. And then the second thing was that students would only be assessed on what they have been taught. So not the whole of the course. But what we have to be able to do when we're awarding grades is we need to ensure that they have ensure sufficient coverage of the curriculum. And what that means is you've covered enough of that course that if you were to go on with that grade and take that course further at college, you're ready for that. So it will allow progression to the next stage. The grade determination was about the grade that the student is performing at now. It's not about the potential grade. So it's not the potential, it's what's the evidence of what grade they could get now. And then it's really clear that what teachers should be doing now is making sure that they continue teaching for as long as possible this year, making sure they build in assessments to gather that evidence and keep teaching to ensure that they do get that sufficient coverage mentioned above. And then also is really clear is the evidence available can be work that's been done over the course and work that's also been done at home. So as long as we are very sure that it's all the student's own work, then that work can be submitted. So in terms of the types of assessment evidence teachers can use to get the grade, first thing is that we can use the materials that the exam boards are going to produce. So exam boards are going to produce materials. So it says here, assessment materials provided by the exam board. They're not setting exam papers. What they are doing is they're going to provide us with a lot of questions and exam board mark schemes for them. And from those, teachers will be able to choose the questions they want to assess the students on. So we can choose questions that do test the content of what students have covered. Similarly, we need to make sure that there's assessments in there to test the really high grades and also questions that are accessible for all abilities of students. So we'll be able to use those and use those in the classroom situation, not in the hall, not doing exams, but we'll be able to use them to assess. And what we've got to be able to do is guarantee that's the student's own work. Students will continue to do their coursework, what's called non-exam assessment work. And even if that's not complete, it will be judged to the same extent as it has been in previous years, taking account of if it's not complete, is that due to the pandemic, etc. So students will continue with their non-exam assessment work when they return to school. Carrying on the same line, it's not just exam board tasks, centre divide tasks. The work that we've been doing all over time, and we've always built assessment into the courses, so we've already got a load of evidence of progress over time and grades that students were working at during year 9, during year 10 and now in year 11. And that can take into account substantial class or homework, including work that's been done in remote learning. So all that work you've been doing and that engagement in remote learning that's been magnificent, that's all going to be brilliant and put you in a really good position. Internal tests, so all the tests we've done over time under test conditions in the classrooms, and whenever you've done mini assessments in different subjects. And then of course we did mock exams in November. So mock exams taken then and mock exams taken in the future during the remainder of this year. What have we planned to do? And then of course, as we've gone through different courses, different subject areas, there's always a record of how students have performed. So we can use those records of performance and progress as long as we know that it's all the students' own work and as long as we know that it's all been marked consistently between different teachers and different classes. So there's loads of places where we can get our evidence from for what grade a student is working at. Now, when it talks about balancing different sorts of evidence in the guidance and in the decisions they've made, the important thing is, when was the evidence produced? So obviously, as students have made progress, they may produce evidence this year that's much stronger than the evidence from year 9 or from year 10, because they've developed and progressed in the subject. We've also got to consider what students were asked to do. How hard was the task? Was it a consistent task marked by all the different teachers in that subject fairly? Has it been moderated? And we can go back to old assessments and moderate them between teachers. And how was the evidence produced? Was it produced by the student at home? Was it produced by the student under test conditions in the classroom? Was it produced in the hall in a mock exam where they're on their own in an exam situation? So we've got to balance up the different strengths of the evidence with the most recent evidence, and the strongest evidence will obviously have a bigger say in the grade we determine. So in terms of making a judgment, teachers have to take account of the standard of any coursework. Exam boards are going to publish guidance to us in March on how to make consistent and fair judgments, and we've already got that guidance from last year to refer to at the moment, so we're preparing for that already. Using the same types of evidence. So moving on to the next bit, this is not down to individual teachers. When this goes through and the grades go through, then the grades need to have been moderated by at least a couple of teachers from a department and the head of department, and then we'll have leaders within the school moderating the judgments as well. The normal adjustments are made for students who would normally get exam access arrangements. So for students with an SEND, or students with a disability, the normal adjustments are going to be made and applied. And if we're using earlier assessment information, those will be applied to that as well, so it's fair and they're not being judged out of context. The assessment materials, as I said a minute ago, they're going to provide materials to schools by the end of March, so that teachers will be able to select materials to assess students from content they have covered. They'll have mark schemes with those questions to ensure that it's fairly marked across the school and across schools. And those are going to be available in all subjects apart from the art subjects. And that's because those are portfolio only, and that was a change made last summer in relation to the fact that obviously the lockdown during year 10. So students will continue to work on their art portfolios, etc., when they return to school, and like they've been doing in lockdown, and those will form the evidence for those subjects. Now, in terms of quality assurance, how are they going to make sure that this is fair and that it's all done openly, above board, and evidence-based? Well, first of all, there's going to be a quality assurance within schools, and we're going to get guidance from exam boards about how we have to put that process in place. Then the exam board are going to check here our quality assurance processes before they allow us to submit grades. And then there's a great long declaration where we have to have met certain criteria, and we have to make sure that the work is the student's own work, and the head of centre has to guarantee that all the quality assurance process is being carried out by the school. It's all been done fairly, everything's been checked, everything's been double checked. So there's a lot of work to do here to get this right, but then that's what we want to do. And it's in our interest because that's what we're in this for. Then externally, exam boards are going to actually check some centres. So exam boards will sample some schools, and they'll sample student grades and subjects. And so what we've got to do is, if we're saying any student is at a particular grade, we need to have that evidence available to support that. That's going to be all gathered together over the coming months, and we may well ask students to bring back in mock papers they've taken home, and we may collect in their exercise books from over time. So when we determine this and get a bit further down the road, once students are back in school, we'll keep you informed, and we'll gather together all that evidence, because the stronger our evidence is, if we are sampled by the exam board, we want to be 100% sure that we have got all the evidence to say that is definitely that grade. Exam boards will then determine whether the school have followed the correct system and that actually we have got the right evidence for the students to have that grade. They won't remark or regrade, but they may well investigate if they find there's issues, and for any school that may be overinflating their grades or underselling their grades, then they'll ask them to go back, do it again, look at it, etc., and maybe resubmit grades. There's also a couple of things in the decisions about in the external checks from the exam boards. They're going to check if a school or college's results are out of line with how that school would normally perform and their past performance. And where there's significant changes in the entry patterns from schools, they may raise concern and actually cause for more checks upon that school. So in summary, this is really for GCSEs to work out the grade, the teacher's judgment, no mathematical models, which is great. We continue to assess, and we teach and assess for as long as possible. So teach all the way up until the middle of June, when the deadline is to put the grades in. We'll talk about that in a minute. You'll only be assessed on what you've been taught. The teachers are going to clarify with students. Students will know what evidence is being used to grade them. So those conversations will happen, and teachers will make that really clear to students ongoing from now on in lessons. This is the information I'm using to come to your grade. What evidence can we use? Well, as we've said, we can use mocks, tests and work already done. We can use any coursework or non-examine assessment. They can be used even if they're incomplete. In art and design subjects, it's the portfolio only. We can use question banks by the exam boards to help us get more evidence. Results will be based on completed and future work, so keep doing your best, and I'll come back to that in a minute. This is by no means finished. We've got several months left of teaching and several months left of assessing and you being able to give us really strong evidence. And then similarly, in the vocational courses like the BTECs, etc., the ones that are most similar to school, which are over this side of the infographic, they're going to be done exactly the same, graded by the teacher, using sources of evidence very similar to the GCSE, and the results coming out at the same time as the GCSEs. There's further guidance coming out about the more practical subjects like drama and music and dance, but again, that'll be fair so that you get the grade you deserve, and similarly with media, which is a VCERT. So we're just waiting for further guidance on those, and obviously teachers will inform you of that. Now, in terms of what happens if you are given a grade and you receive your grades and you don't like them, well, every student can appeal the grade. Before the grade is even put in, teachers will make sure they understand what evidence is being used. Students can appeal to a centre, and the centre checks their process to make sure that actually no error has been made. If the student's still not happy after that, they can ask the school or college to submit a formal appeal to the exam board. The exam board then will look at it. They'll look at the grade, they'll look at the evidence, and they'll look at the process we carried out. If there's a disagreement, then there's an appeals procedure, and it goes to the Ofquals Exams Procedure Review Service. And what the appeal will be doing and what the exam boards will be doing, etc., is they're looking at, have the school reasonably judged the evidence to come up with the right grade. Hopefully we'll get it right for everybody and there'll be no need for that. So, results day, the plan at the moment, and the guidance in one part it says working towards the 12th of August, but that's the date that's been put out there by the Department for Education, that students will receive their GCSEs on the 12th of August to allow time for appeals, etc., to be done before students move on to college. The same date for the BTECs and technical qualifications. Then there'll be a window for appeals. Exam boards will help schools and colleges in prioritising appeals, where the grades are really essential for a student moving on to the next stage of their education or training. That's more aimed at students moving on from year 13 to university, etc. but it may well apply to some of our students moving on to apprenticeships where they need to have certain grades. And there's an autumn series of exams going to be available for students who are disappointed by the grades they get. And if students actually end up thinking, actually, if I was to sit that under proper exam situation, I could do a better grade, there'll be an opportunity to sit exams in the autumn term. So from now on, what's really great is you will get the grades that you deserve. Just like every other year at this stage, we'd be encouraging Year 11s to work really hard, and that's going to help them get the better grade in their exams at the end of Year 11, and it's no different this year. The harder you work from now on, the better you do in any assessments, the more evidence you're giving to your teachers, the more evidence we're going to have, and the better your grade will be. Between now and the 18th of June, which is when the grades need to be submitted from the school to the exam board, what your teachers need to do is continue teaching you for as long as possible, as soon as you're back in school, and continuing now at the moment with the remote education. They need to gather together all that evidence to support the grade and help them determine what grade you get. They need to build in assessments so they've got really strong evidence of what grade you can perform at. And then they need to make sure that all of that is standardised and moderated across teams, and that we follow those quality assurance processes that are going to come out from the exam boards, so we get this right for you. What's great for you is that you need to work hard, try your best, and you will get what grade you deserve, what grade you demonstrate you can work at consistently. So keep working hard, try your very best, and aim for the sky. That's the way to get there. Okay, thank you for listening.